Are you or someone you know looking to buy or sell a home? When you use a HomeGain Realtor to buy or sell a home, you can get $150. Visit HomeGain.com and click on the Promo 150 banner at the top of the page to get started. Compare HomeGain Realtors and choose your favorite. Complete your home purchase or sale transaction with a HomeGain Realtor, and HomeGain will pay you $150. Get started today by going to HomeGain.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Real Estate 360 Live. I'm your host, Ryan Sloper, joined today by my guest, Louis Cammarosano, the general manager of HomeGain. Quick reminder, Real Estate 360 is designed to build the Washington, D.C. Metro's housing and credit markets. If you ever have any questions, concerns, real estate needs, whether it's credit, finance, buying or selling a home, trying to get your credit fixed to get it up to par to where you can buy a home, anything that I can do to help, I'd be glad to. It's 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030, or via the web at realestate360live.com. That's realestate360live.com. So it's interesting, Wells Fargo just exited the actual wholesale lending market. Why this is really interesting to me, it was more or less the timing of it. Just last week, it was almost like hand in hand. In one of their largest fair lending payouts in history, they agreed to spend at least $175 million to settle federal accusations that had steered Black and Latino borrowers into high-cost loans and charged them excessive fees. Louis, I find this interesting because it was almost like this came down and all of a sudden they cut their wholesale lending department, which is almost, I mean, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying that this is the truth, but it almost seems like that they're kind of blaming a lot of those type of loans on the brokers that were sending the loans to them through their wholesale channel. That Wells Fargo cut their wholesale lending platform, which accounted for almost 25% of that overall wholesale market. So I think that it's rather interesting, the timing that all that happened and took place.
Well, it highlights that there's not a lot of money in that, and there's liability.
Yeah, absolutely, a lot of liability, and I would venture to say this might be interesting to see what the other big banks do, because they tend to follow in suit. I'll be shocked if a few other ones don't decide to cut their wholesale lending departments as well.
Well, you see, then you have the unintended consequence that the idea is to have equality and make more loans available to more people. Banks, what they'll do is they'll just not lend at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the people that, that this judgment is supposed to help going forward will not be helped because the loans won't be there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much regulation. I mean, the irony in this whole situation is to feel like there's so much regulation now where loan officers basically have set pay that they receive. It can't be tied to, interest rates or anything like that. So I don't really know what that has to do with lending now, other than them trying to take a stance on what they did in the past was wrong. But ultimately, I mean, there's so much over-regulation in the industry that it gets to be almost absurd to try to figure out what you can and cannot do. And obviously the borrowers are out there trying to shop and get the very best deal, which is perfectly fine. But the broker channel, or that wholesale channel, was good for the market because it gave people the ability to shop multiple banks. Wells Fargo is now the one that's going to fall off the list. So, and at the end of the day, it's hurting the consumer still. You
also think about new entrants into that market. They're already steered away. So you lose the largest one, and you're going to lose the new ones who won't be able to comply with the regulations or are worried about the liability.
Yeah, I mean, competition is good, and when you start losing the big players, I mean, the small guys, I mean, they don't tend to survive. So ultimately, another thing that is bad for the consumer. I hate to say it, but I feel like that's what it is going to be on that. I've had a lot of questions from listeners lately, Louis, about, where do they see home prices going? And once again, this is, there's people all over the place, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, and we have people that listen across the country streaming online. So the best answer that I can tend to give people is that, well, it depends where you live. I'm not one of those guys like, Lawrence Yoon, who's the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, who just recently came out in a conference in Denver a few weeks ago and said, this time next year there should be a 10% price appreciation. I would not be surprised to see that. Well, that's a great comment to make. So we talked about the national media once again, Louis. If you just look at that comment, you have the chief economist for the National Association of Real Estate Editors conference saying this, you might assume, hey, well, my house might go up 10% next year. Well, that's probably not going to be the case because, all real estate markets are local. Now, in the Northern Virginia, D.C. metro area, could that happen? I would say that it could be likely that it might happen if it continues to trend the way it's been trending for the last 6 months.
Well, the HomeGain second quarter home value survey, 83% of Virginia realtors and real estate professionals and 33% of Virginia homeowners do expect a price increase in the next 6 months, and that contrasts to the national average pretty dramatically. So you're right, it's local, and there is probably some cause for optimism in the Washington, D.C., Virginia area.
Yeah, and then I believe it was a few days earlier from that. I want to say it was Morgan Stanley or somebody in their latest housing report came out and said there was going to be a drop of 5 to 10% more. So really, this all boils right back down to the same thing that we discussed in the last segment, where don't rely on the media to make your real estate decisions. Don't do it. Work with a professional that knows the local real estate markets that can give you a bird's eye view of what's going on. What that means is they should be able to break down for you what's sold in your specific subdivision in the last 3 months, in the last 6 months, what your property would ballpark probably appraise for, so you got a good idea of where you stand. Because if you just, and a lot of people I'm finding, Lewis, they do a lot of their research online where they try to figure out, hey, well, that house sold up the street for $320 and that's just like mine. Yet they don't really know that house has about $50,000 of upgrades inside. So, those little things really sway the value one way or the other. And the only way that you're going to know what your value, your property is probably better valued at or understand why it's valued where it is to be working with a professional that's looking at these houses day in and day out. There's, a lot of the time there's bump outs on houses. There's upgraded kitchens and bathrooms and finished basements and not. And to be honest with you, I'm seeing a lot of laziness on the side of realtors where they're not even filling out the listings properly. I mean, we talked about weeks prior that some of them aren't even putting pictures in their listings, but they're not even completely filling the listing out where there might be a finished basement, but it's not shown in the listing as a finished basement. Now, why is that a problem? Because the appraisers tend to rely on the MLS, the multiple listing systems, to gather their intel when they're filling out their appraisal reports. So if they didn't sit there and call every single real estate agent with the comparables that they're using and verify that information, they're taking it right from MLS. So if there's something off that's there, it could cause an appraisal report to be wrong. Now, what do I suggest? This is what I do as a practice for my sellers. I like to tend to meet the appraiser at the house. Why do I like to do that? Because I want to make sure that he has the same data that I have that's accurate. And if he doesn't, I'm going to get it in his hands. Now, does that mean that I have any influence over his value? Probably not. But at least I'm giving him the information that I use to price the home. I see a lot of transactions fall apart because the appraiser just goes out there. He never even talks to the listing agent that priced the home. Now, I understand that you're not supposed to have any sort of ability to sway a appraiser's decision on the value one way or the other. But you also, to me, have an obligation to your seller to make sure that they have the right information in their hands. And if they're relying solely on the multiple listing system, I would say that that's not necessarily the best thing for your client. I want to bring that up, Lewis, just because I've seen that happen a couple times lately where appraisals came in $20,000, $30,000 short, and it was mainly just because the listings weren't completely filled out properly, which it hurt the value. And hurting the value ultimately leads to another transaction that didn't go through. So there's so many small intricate pieces when it comes to a real estate transaction. It's not just writing a contract and then all of a sudden you're going to closing. You write the contract, you have a home inspection, you have an appraisal, you have to get financing on that property. You have to go to a final walkthrough where sometimes that can throw a whole monkey wrench where there's holes all over the walls because people didn't take care of the house and they ripped the pictures off and didn't go back and mud and paint over it. So just because you think you've hit the end of the road and you're going to close, it doesn't always happen that way. And I think really just working with a professional that's going to let you know up front what the hiccups might be is the best course of action there, because if you're aware of all this stuff, when it does happen, it's not as big of a deal. And where I would suggest, you can start your search nationally to find local real estate agents and compare them against each other is definitely starting with HomeGain. And Lewis, using your service, they can go to HomeGain, and then how do they compare the real estate agents? Can you remind our listeners once again?
Oh, sure. You go to HomeGain.com and you check the Find a Realtor tab on the front page, and there you decide whether you're buying or selling. And what we do is we take your information, but we don't send it along to the real estate agents. You put down what you're interested in buying or selling a home, what the details of the type of home you'd like to purchase, or the details of the home you want to sell, and then real estate agents contact you through your HomeGain interface, and you can review their proposals anonymously. And when you're ready to speak with one of them, remember they don't have your contact information. They respond to your HomeGain interface, and you log in and you compare the proposals. And when you're ready to pick one, you pick one. If you're not ready to pick one, you don't. If you have questions, you can ask them. The good thing here is you remain anonymous, and you get to select a realtor on an apples-to-apples basis, and you pick the best one and make sure that you've got the right professional. As Ryan says every time, that you need to have a good professional helping you with the purchase or sale of a home, and that's what you can get at HomeGain.com. You can also look at home values, home prices, and all the other real estate articles and tips on real estate that we have at HomeGain.com.
Thanks so much, Louis. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. We're coming up on the end of the show, but we'll be back again next Monday from 2 to 3 p.m. Remember, if you ever have any questions or concerns in the meantime, reach out to me at 877-245-2030. That's 877-245-2030. Thanks a lot, guys, and have a great week.